Daniel Cross pulled his fighter jet into a tight turn, watching the stars blur past his cockpit window. 15 years had passed since the Great War ended, but out here in the neutral zone, peace felt like a fragile thing that could shatter at any moment. His squadron flew in perfect formation, 6 human pilots keeping watch over the border between 2 vast empires that still didn't trust each other. Contact ahead, his radio crackled. Single ship, massive signature. It's Draconian. Daniel's hands tightened on the controls. The Draconians were dragon-like beings from the Dominion Empire, humanity's former enemies. They were supposed to stay on their side of the neutral zone. This was a violation of the treaty. All units, weapons hot but hold fire, Commander Wilson's voice came through. Let's see what they want. The ship that appeared on Daniel's screen made him catch his breath. It was enormous, easily 10 times the size of their largest carrier. Golden scales covered its hull, and it bore the royal crest of the Draconian ruling family. This wasn't just any ship. This was royalty. They're hailing us, the communications officer reported back to the fleet. They request permission to speak with Lieutenant Daniel Cross by name. Daniel felt his blood run cold. How did they know his name? Why would Draconian royalty want to speak with him? He was just a pilot, nobody special. This could be a trap, Wilson said. Cross, you don't have to accept. But curiosity burned inside Daniel. I'll talk to them, sir. 2 hours later, Daniel stood in the landing bay of the Coalition flagship. His hands were sweating inside his gloves. The Draconian ship had docked, and now someone was coming out. The bay doors opened with a hiss of air, and she walked through. She was beautiful in a way that made Daniel forget to breathe. Her scales shimmered like they were made of starlight itself, shifting between silver and blue. She stood on 2 legs like a human, but had wings folded against her back that could probably spread wide enough to cover a small house. Her eyes were golden, ancient, and somehow sad. Lieutenant Daniel Cross, she said, her voice musical and strange. It has been a very long time. Daniel stared at her, confused. I don't know you. The dragon woman smiled, and something in that smile made his heart ache for reasons he couldn't explain. Human pilot, don't you remember me? I was your childhood friend. That's impossible, Daniel said. I've never met a Draconian before the war, and I certainly never met royalty. She reached into a pouch at her side and pulled out something small. It glinted in the harsh lights of the landing bay. Then how do you explain this? She held up half of a medallion. It was made of some strange metal that seemed to glow from within. The edge was jagged, broken cleanly in half. Daniel's hand went to his pocket before he could stop himself. Inside was a small object he'd carried since childhood. His father had given it to him, said it was a family heirloom. He'd never understood what it was or why it mattered, but he'd kept it anyway. He pulled it out. The other half of the medallion. The dragon woman stepped closer and held her piece next to his. They fit together perfectly like 2 parts of one whole. When they touched, both pieces began to glow brighter. My name is Lyra, she said softly. We met 20 years ago on Haven's Rest. You were 8 years old. I was young too. We played in the old ruins and made promises to each other. Daniel's head began to hurt. Fragments of memories pushed at the edges of his mind. Things he'd forgotten or buried deep. A girl with scales who laughed at his jokes. Running through ancient corridors, exploring. A promise made under twin moons, the raid, he whispered. There was a raid. Everything burned. I thought everyone died. I survived, Lyra said. But we were separated. I've been looking for you ever since. The armed guards around them shifted nervously. Commander Wilson stepped forward. Princess Lyra, why are you here? Why now? Lyra's expression turned serious. Because something terrible is about to happen. Admiral Voren, one of our military commanders, has found an ancient weapon. It's called the Starbreaker. If he activates it, entire star systems will die. Billions of lives, both human and Draconian, will be lost. Why should we believe you? Wilson demanded. Because Voren plans to frame humanity for the attack, Lyra said. He'll destroy our own colonies and make it look like your people did it. The war will begin again, and this time it won't end until one side is completely destroyed. Daniel felt sick. Why tell us? Why not stop him yourself? Because I can't, Lyra said, and her voice broke slightly. Voren has support in the Dominion court. Many still want war. If I move against him openly, I'll be arrested for treason. But if a human and a Draconian work together, if we show both sides that cooperation is possible, maybe we can stop this. She looked directly at Daniel. I need your help. I need the friend I made all those years ago. Wilson pulled Daniel aside. This could be a trick. We can't trust her. Daniel looked at the medallion in his hand, still glowing faintly. Memories were coming back faster now. Her laughter. Her kindness. The day everything fell apart and he'd screamed her name into smoke and fire, certain she was dead. I think I remember her, sir, Daniel said. And if there's even a chance she's telling the truth, we have to listen. If you do this, it's unofficial, Wilson warned. The coalition won't back you up if things go wrong. Lyra stepped forward again. Our intelligence shows unusual fleet movements near the Ashara Nebula. That's where Voron is searching for the Starbreaker. If we move now, we might stop him before he finds it. Daniel made his decision. I'm going with her. You'll be listed as AWOL, Wilson said. Possibly a deserter. Then I guess I'll be a deserter, sir. Lieutenant Grace Howard pushed through the crowd of guards. If Daniel's going, so am I. Someone needs to watch his back. Wilson looked at them both, then sighed. I can't officially approve this, but I can look the other way for 24 hours. After that, you're on your own. Lyra bowed her head. Thank you, Commander. As they prepared to leave, Daniel caught Lyra's arm. I need to know something. Did you really know me, or is this just a convenient story? Lyra reached up and touched his face gently with her clawed hand. You told me once that humans see pictures in the stars. You showed me how to find the Hunter constellation. You said that no matter where we were, we could both look up and see the same stars, that we'd never really be apart. Daniel's breath caught. He did remember saying that. The memory was clear now, sharp and painful in its sweetness. I remember, he whispered. Then trust me, Lyra said, like you did when we were children. Help me save both our peoples. Daniel looked at Grace, who nodded. He looked at the medallion in his hand. Then he looked at Lyra, at the hope in her golden eyes. Let's go stop a war, he said. The small draconian scout ship slipped through the darkness between stars like a silver needle through black cloth. Daniel sat in the co-pilot seat, watching Lyra's clawed hands move across controls that looked nothing like human technology. Grace sat behind them, checking weapons for the third time in an hour. Nobody spoke much. The weight of what they were doing pressed down on all of them. Haven's Rest is 3 hours away, Lyra said quietly. I thought we should go there first, before we chase Voron into the nebula. Why? Grace asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. She still didn't trust Lyra, Daniel could tell. We're wasting time. Because Daniel needs to remember, Lyra said. And I need him to understand why this matters so much. Daniel looked at the medallion sitting on the control panel between them. The two halves were still fitted together, glowing softly. Every time he looked at it, more memories leaked through the walls he'd built in his mind. A little girl with scales teaching him words in her language, building castles out of rubble in ancient ruins, her crying when she scraped her knee, him giving her his scarf to wrap around it. Tell me about that day, Daniel said. The day everything ended. Lyra's hand stilled on the controls. There was going to be a treaty signing. My parents and yours were there as diplomats. Haven's Rest was supposed to be proof that our species could live together peacefully. Then the extremists attacked. Both sides had groups that wanted war, not peace. I remember explosions, Daniel said slowly. Fire, my father grabbing me and running. I was screaming for someone. For you. I was trapped in the eastern quarter, Lyra said. The buildings collapsed. By the time my guards dug me out, all the human families were gone. Evacuated. I searched the ruins for days, calling your name. Grace made a sound that might have been sympathy. So you split a medallion like some kind of fairy tale? We were children, Lyra said simply. We didn't know what else to do. Daniel's father gave him that medallion the morning before the attack. It was supposed to be a symbol of the alliance between our peoples. When we were separated, we broke it in half, a promise that we'd find each other again. The ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and Haven's Rest appeared ahead of them. Daniel felt his chest tighten. The planet looked dead. The green continents he barely remembered were now gray and brown. Cities that had sparkled with lights were dark ruins. What happened here? He breathed. The war, Lyra said bitterly. Both sides fought over it for years. Nobody won. Everyone lost. They landed near what had been the central colony. As soon as Daniel stepped out onto the dusty ground, something inside him broke open. Memories flooded back so fast he had to grab the ship's landing strut to stay upright. This street. He'd walked down this street holding his mother's hand. That building, Now just a skeleton of walls, had been a school where both human and draconian children learned together. And there, that pile of rubble that might once have been a library, that's where he'd first met her. "Daniel?" Grace touched his shoulder. "You okay?" He wasn't okay. He was 8 years old again, scared and alone and calling for his friend. But he was also 28, a soldier who'd fought draconians for years without knowing that he'd once loved one. Lyra walked ahead of them, her wings tucked tight against her back. She moved through the ruins like she knew every stone. She probably did. "Here," she said, stopping at what looked like an entrance to underground tunnels. "Do you remember this place?" Daniel did. The ancient ruins beneath the colony. Nobody knew who'd built them or when. They were thousands of years old, filled with strange writings and beautiful carvings. He and Lyra had spent hours exploring them, pretending they were adventurers discovering lost treasure. They climbed down into the darkness. Lyra's scales began to glow softly, providing light. Grace pulled out a flashlight, sweeping it across walls covered in dust and time. "We found a chamber," Lyra said, leading them deeper. It had paintings on the walls. Pictures of the species that built this place. "Do you remember what we called them?" "The old ones," Daniel whispered. The memory was crystal clear now. "We thought they looked like they were made of stars." "This way," Lyra said. The chamber was exactly as Daniel remembered it, frozen in time. The paintings on the walls showed tall, elegant beings doing things he still didn't understand. Planting gardens among the stars, building worlds. There was something peaceful about the images, something that spoke of harmony and creation rather than war and destruction. "We sat right there," Lyra said, pointing to a flat stone in the center of the room. "You told me about Earth, about oceans and forests. I told you about my homeworld, about crystal mountains and singing storms. We promised that one day we'd visit both places together." "We were just kids," Daniel said, but his voice shook. "We didn't understand how complicated everything was." "We understood the important things," Lyra said. "We understood that differences didn't have to mean enemies. That friendship was possible." Grace had been quiet, exploring the chamber. Now she spoke up. "There's writing here I've never seen before. It's not draconian or human. It's the old one's language," Lyra said. "I studied it for years after the war. I thought if I could understand them, I could understand how to build peace." "Can you read it?" Grace asked. "Some of it," Lyra admitted. "This section talks about a great tool they built, something that could reshape entire worlds, turn dead planets into gardens. They called it something that translates roughly to World Maker." Daniel felt cold understanding wash over him. "The Starbreaker." "I think they're the same thing," Lyra confirmed. "The old ones built a terraforming device, but in the wrong hands, something that can reshape worlds can also destroy them. Voran found references to it in ruins like these. He's been searching for it for years." "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Grace demanded. "Your people, our people, someone should know about this." "I tried," Lyra said, and for the first time Daniel heard true pain in her voice. "But I was young and I was obsessed with humans, with finding Daniel. The court dismissed me as a foolish princess chasing childhood dreams. By the time I had proof that Voran was serious, he had too much support, too many people who wanted the war to continue." She turned to Daniel. "That's why I need you. Because you're the only one who might believe me, the only one who knows I'm not lying." Daniel looked at the paintings on the walls, at the peaceful scenes of creation and growth. Then he looked at Lyra, really looked at her. She was exhausted, he realized, scared. She'd been fighting this fight alone for years. "I believe you," he said. "I remember you, Lyra. I remember all of it. And I'm sorry I forgot." "You didn't forget," she said gently. "You survived. That's what matters." Grace cleared her throat. "This is all very touching, but we still have a problem. If Voran gets to this Starbreaker thing before we do, millions die. So what's our plan?" Lyra pulled up a holographic map from a device on her wrist. "The Ashara Nebula is 3 days' travel from here. Long-range scans show heavy draconian fleet presence near these coordinates. That's where Voran is searching." 3 days, Daniel said. "We don't have much time." "There's another problem," Lyra said quietly. "By now, both your coalition and my Dominion know what we're doing. They'll be looking for us. My father will send hunters to bring me back. Your command will send ships to arrest you for desertion. So we're alone against everyone," Grace said. "Great odds. Not everyone," Lyra said. "I have contacts in the Dominion who believe in peace. And Daniel, your Commander Wilson gave us 24 hours for a reason. He suspects we're telling the truth. Daniel picked up the medallion from where he'd set it down on the stone. The two halves gleamed in the dim light of the chamber. When we were kids, we thought this represented our friendship. But maybe it means something bigger. Maybe it's about two halves of one whole. Human and draconian, different but stronger together. That's beautiful, Grace said dryly. But poetry won't stop a doomsday weapon. No, Daniel agreed. But trust might. We trusted each other once, Lyra and I. We're going to have to trust each other again. All three of us. He held out his hand to Grace. She looked at it, then at Lyra, then back at him. Finally, she took it. I trust you, Daniel, she said. And if you trust her, then I'll try. Lyra placed her clawed hand on top of theirs. Thank you. Both of you. I know how much I'm asking. You're asking us to help save the galaxy, Daniel said. That's worth the risk. They left the chamber and climbed back to the surface. As they walked toward the ship, Daniel took one last look at the ruined colony. This place had been destroyed by fear and hatred, by people who couldn't imagine peace between different species. But it had also been a place where friendship had been possible, where two children from different worlds had seen past scales and skin to the person underneath. We'll come back here someday, he told Lyra, when this is over. We'll rebuild it. As a symbol, Lyra said, understanding immediately. As a home, Daniel corrected. For anyone who believes different doesn't mean enemy. They boarded the ship and set course for the Ashara Nebula. Behind them, Haven's Rest faded into the distance, a graveyard of what had been lost. But ahead, somewhere in the darkness between stars, lay the chance to prevent another tragedy. To stop history from repeating itself. Daniel didn't know if they'd succeed. But he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't that scared 8-year-old anymore, and Lyra wasn't that helpless child. They were stronger now. And together, they might just be strong enough to make a difference. Space combat was nothing like the simulations. Daniel threw the scout ship into a spiral as energy bolts screamed past their hull, each one close enough to make the shields flare bright blue. Behind them, 3 Coalition interceptors matched every move he made. In front, 2 Draconian destroyers blocked their path into the nebula. They were trapped between both sides, hunted by the very people they were trying to save. I've got a lock on the lead Coalition ship, Grace called from the weapons station. Permission to fire? Negative, Daniel said through gritted teeth. Those are our people. I won't shoot them. They're shooting at us. Warning shots, Lyra said calmly, her hands flying over the navigation controls. Both sides want us alive. The Coalition wants you for questioning. The Dominion wants me for trial. Nobody gains anything if we're dead. A blast rocked the ship anyway, nearly throwing Daniel from his seat. That didn't feel like a warning. Someone's getting impatient, Lyra said. She touched a series of symbols on her screen. Daniel, when I say now, dive straight down. Grace, deploy countermeasures on my mark. Down is relative in space, Daniel muttered, but he trusted her. He'd trusted her when they were children, and that trust was coming back like muscle memory. Now! Daniel slammed the controls forward. The ship dropped like a stone, artificial gravity struggling to compensate. Grace launched a cloud of reflective particles behind them. The sensors on both sets of pursuing ships went haywire, giving them precious seconds. There! Lyra pointed at the nav screen. That debris field. If we can reach it, we can lose them in the wreckage. The debris field was the remains of an old battle from the war. Shattered ships, both human and draconian, drifted in a graveyard of metal and regret. Daniel hated these places. Every piece of floating wreckage represented lives lost, families destroyed. But it would hide them. He threaded the scout ship between broken hull plates and dead engines. Behind them, the Coalition interceptors tried to follow, but they were too big, too slow. One clipped a piece of debris and had to pull back. The Draconian destroyers were more cautious, hanging at the edge of the field and running scans. They'll find us eventually, Grace said. These ships have the best sensors credits can buy. Not better than mine, Lyra said quietly. She was doing something with her controls, her clawed fingers moving in patterns Daniel didn't recognize. I'm masking our energy signature, making us look like just another piece of debris. It won't fool them for long, but long enough. They waited in the silence of the dead ships. Daniel found himself staring at a section of hull that still bore the Coalition flag. Someone had died in that ship. Maybe someone with a family waiting for them. Maybe someone who'd fought believing they were protecting humanity from monsters. I killed Draconians during the war, he said suddenly. I was good at it. Decorated for it. Lyra didn't look at him. I know. I read your service record. How many did you kill? He asked. Humans, I mean. Now she did look at him. Her golden eyes were sad but steady. 37 confirmed. More probable. I was a fighter pilot too, Daniel. Before I became a princess, I was a warrior. Grace shifted uncomfortably. My brother died fighting Draconians. Ship-to-ship combat near the Outer Rim. They never even recovered his body. The silence stretched between them, heavy with old grief and newer guilt. We can't change the past, Lyra said finally. We can only try to prevent the future from being worse. If Vorin activates the Starbreaker, the deaths from the war will seem like nothing. Billions will die. Both our species will blame each other. The killing will never stop. She's right, Grace said, surprising Daniel. My brother wouldn't want more deaths in his name. He'd want this to end. The scanner beeped. The pursuing ships were moving away, expanding their search pattern. Lyra had fooled them, at least temporarily. Now, she said, while they're looking elsewhere. Daniel piloted them out of the debris field on the opposite side, moving slow and quiet. They slipped into the edge of the Ashara Nebula, where swirling gases and electromagnetic interference made scanning difficult. The nebula glowed purple and green around them, beautiful and deadly. According to my sources, Vorin's excavation site is deep inside, Lyra said, marking a point on the map. It's an ancient space station built by the old ones. The Starbreaker is somewhere inside. How big is his fleet? Daniel asked. At least 20 ships, maybe more. Lyra's voice was grim, and they're all loyal to him personally. Warriors who lost families in the war, who want revenge more than peace. 3 of us against an entire fleet, Grace said. I've had better odds. We're not going to fight them, Lyra said. We're going to sneak past them, reach the station first, and disable the Starbreaker before Vorin can activate it. And if we can't? Daniel asked. Then we destroy it. Even if we die doing it. They flew deeper into the nebula. The gases grew thicker, interfering with their sensors and communications. They were truly alone now, cut off from both the Coalition and the Dominion. 3 rogues on a mission that might already be impossible. Contact, Grace said suddenly. Single ship, Draconian signature. It's on an intercept course. Daniel's hand moved to weapons, but Lyra stopped him. Wait, that's a courier ship. Only one person uses that type of vessel out here. The ship appeared on their view screen. It was small and fast, painted in dark colors that helped it blend into the nebula. A voice crackled over their communication system. Princess Lyra, I was wondering when you'd show up. Lyra smiled for the first time since they'd entered the nebula. Commander Roth, I was hoping you'd see reason. Reason has nothing to do with it, the voice said. I'm a loyal officer of the Dominion. But I'm not a murderer. Vorin's plan is madness. The courier ship matched their course. Through the view screen, Daniel could see the pilot. He was Draconian, older with gray scales and scars that spoke of many battles. How many others think like you? Lyra asked. Not enough, Roth admitted. Vorin has the support of the military council. They see the Starbreaker as a way to end the threat of humanity forever. They don't care about the cost. Can you get us close to the station? Daniel asked. Roth studied him through the screen. You're the human the princess is risking everything for. I wondered what you'd be like. Desperate, Daniel said honestly, and running out of time. Aren't we all? Roth said. Follow me. I know a route through Vorin's perimeter that isn't as heavily guarded. But once we're close, you're on your own. I can't be seen helping you directly, or my crew will be executed as traitors. They followed the courier ship through the twisting passages of the nebula. Twice they passed Draconian patrol ships, but Roth's presence kept them from being questioned. He was a known commander trusted by Vorin. Why are you helping us? Grace asked over the comm. You're betraying your own people. I'm saving my people, Roth corrected. From themselves. I fought in the war, human. I saw what hatred does. I watched cities burn. If we use the Starbreaker the way Vorin plans, we become the monsters your people always feared we were. The ancient space station appeared ahead like a ghost from the past. It was massive, built in a spiral pattern that seemed to defy physics. Parts of it glowed with faint light, suggesting it still had power after thousands of years. Vorin's fleet surrounded it, ships swarming around the station like insects. There, Roth said, highlighting a section on their shared map. That docking port is old and damaged. Voron's people haven't secured it yet. If you move fast, you can get inside. What about you? Lyra asked. I'll return to my position in the fleet. When the time comes, I'll do what I can to help. But Lyra, you need to know something. Voron isn't just looking for the Starbreaker anymore. He knows you're here. He's set a trap. What kind of trap? Daniel demanded. The kind where he captures you both and uses you as proof of human draconian conspiracy. He'll parade you before the Dominion Council and the galaxy. The human pilot who corrupted a princess. The princess who betrayed her own species. It will be the justification he needs for war. Lyra's expression hardened. Then we don't get caught. They thanked Roth and watched his ship peel away, heading back to the fleet. Then they approached the damaged docking port, moving slowly to avoid detection. The station loomed larger and larger, its ancient architecture strange and beautiful. I've got a bad feeling about this, Grace muttered. Welcome to my entire life lately, Daniel replied. They docked with a soft clang. The airlock cycled and they stepped into the station. The interior was dark except for the soft glow of lights that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The architecture was organic, flowing, nothing like human or draconian design. The old ones built this, Lyra whispered. We're walking through their legacy. They moved deeper into the station, following Lyra's scans toward the central chamber where the Starbreaker supposedly waited. But Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that every step took them closer to a trap. He was right. They rounded a corner and found themselves in a large chamber, and there, waiting for them with a dozen armed soldiers, was Admiral Voron himself. He was huge, even for a draconian, with black scales and eyes like ice. Princess Lyra, he said, his voice smooth and cold. How kind of you to deliver yourself to me. And you brought the human pet. Perfect. Energy weapons powered up all around them. They were surrounded, outgunned, and out of options. Voron smiled. Welcome to your execution. The prison cell was too small and too cold. Daniel sat on the metal bench, his hands bound with energy restraints that hummed softly. Across from him, Grace paced like a caged animal, testing every wall and corner for weaknesses. They'd been separated from Lyra immediately after Voron's soldiers captured them. That was hours ago, maybe longer. Time was hard to track in this windowless cell. We need to get out of here, Grace said for the 100th time. I know, Daniel replied. I'm open to suggestions. I don't have any. That's the problem. The door slid open. 2 guards entered, dragging Lyra between them. They threw her into the cell and left without a word. The door sealed behind them with a hiss of compressed air. Lyra! Daniel was at her side immediately. She looked terrible. Her scales were dull and there were burns on her arms from energy weapons. What did they do to you? Questioned me, she said weakly. About you. About the coalition. About why I betrayed the Dominion. Did you tell them anything? She managed a small smile. I told them the truth. That sometimes friendship matters more than politics. That made Voron very angry. Grace helped Lyra to the bench. So what's his plan? Execute us publicly? Worse, Lyra said. He's going to broadcast my trial across the galaxy. Show everyone how I was corrupted by human influence. Then he'll execute me and Daniel together, as an example of what happens when species try to cooperate. And me? Grace asked. He'll return you to the coalition as a gesture of goodwill, right before he activates the Starbreaker and destroys a dozen human colonies. You'll be alive to witness the beginning of the new war. Daniel slammed his fist against the wall. There has to be a way out. There is, said a voice from the doorway. They all spun around. Commander Roth stood there alone, holding an energy key. He worked quickly, disabling the lock on their cell. Roth, Lyra breathed. How did you... I'm still a trusted officer, he said grimly. For now, but we need to move fast. I've started a disturbance in the prisoner block. It won't last long. He freed their restraints. Daniel rubbed his wrists, feeling blood flow return to his hands. Why are you doing this? Roth looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death. Because 30 years ago I lost my family in a coalition bombing raid. My mate, my children. I spent decades hating humans, wanting revenge. I supported Voron because I thought he could give me that revenge. He paused, his expression pained. Then tonight I listened to him interrogate the princess. He talked about how many millions he would kill, how he would burn human worlds and enjoy their suffering. And I realized that if my children were alive, they would be ashamed of what I've become. Grace studied him. My brother died fighting draconians. I hated your kind for years. Maybe I still do, a little. But this isn't about revenge anymore. It's about stopping the cycle. Exactly, Roth said. Now move. The armory is 2 levels down. You'll need weapons. They ran through corridors filled with ancient architecture and modern military equipment. The old one's station had been taken over by Voron's forces. Beautiful spaces converted into weapons storage and barracks. Twice they had to hide while patrols passed. Each time Daniel's heart pounded so hard he was sure they'd hear it. The armory was guarded, but Roth's authority got them inside. They armed themselves quickly. Daniel took a human-style rifle, familiar and reliable. Grace grabbed 2 pistols and a combat knife. Lyra refused weapons. I fight differently, she said, and her claws extended slightly. Alarms began blaring. Roth cursed. They've discovered the prisoner break. We're out of time. Where's the Starbreaker? Daniel demanded. Central chamber 3 levels deeper. But Voron has it heavily guarded. You'll never fight through. We have to try, Lyra said. They fought their way through the station. Voron's soldiers appeared at every turn, forcing them to fight or flee or both. Daniel hated every shot he fired at draconian troops. These weren't monsters. They were people who'd been hurt by war just like Roth, just like him. But they didn't have a choice. Grace moved like a professional, efficient and deadly. She'd trained for this her whole career. Lyra was incredible to watch, moving faster than Daniel thought possible, her claws and tail making her a whirlwind of precise strikes. She didn't kill unless she had to, but she disabled enemies with surgical precision. Roth led them through service corridors and maintenance shafts, paths he'd learned during his time with Voron's fleet. But as they descended deeper into the station, it became clear they weren't going to make it. Too many guards, Grace panted. They'd taken cover behind a pillar while energy bolts scorched the air around them. We need another plan. The ventilation system, Roth said suddenly. The old ones built it large enough to move through. It connects to the central chamber. Can you guide us? Lyra asked. Roth shook his head. I need to stay here. Create a distraction. Draw the guards away from your path. Otherwise, they'll just follow you through the vents. That's suicide, Daniel said. No. Roth smiled sadly. That's redemption. Tell the galaxy what happened here. Tell them an old warrior finally remembered what honor meant. Before they could argue, Roth stepped out from cover and opened fire on the guards, shouting insults and challenges. The draconian soldiers turned their attention to him immediately. In the chaos, Lyra pulled open a vent cover. Now, she hissed. While they're focused on him, they climbed into the ventilation shaft. Behind them, they heard weapons fire intensify. Roth was fighting hard, giving them every second he could. Then the sound stopped abruptly, followed by a thud that made Daniel's chest ache. He's gone, Grace whispered. He chose this, Lyra said quietly. Honor him by finishing what we started. They crawled through the vents, following Lyra's sense of direction and Daniel's memory of the station maps they'd studied. The central chamber had to be close now. They could feel vibrations through the walls, a deep thrumming that suggested massive machinery powering up. The Starbreaker, Lyra said urgently. Voron's activating it. They moved faster, scraping knees and elbows on metal. Finally, they reached a vent that opened into the central chamber. Through the grating, they could see it. The Starbreaker was beautiful and terrible. It hung suspended in the center of the chamber, a crystalline structure that seemed to contain entire galaxies within its depths. Energy flowed through it in patterns that hurt to look at. Around it, Voron's technicians worked frantically at control stations. And there, on a raised platform, stood Voron himself. The weapon is ready, he announced to his assembled officers. We will fire on the human colony of New Haven first. 3 million humans will die instantly. The coalition will blame us, and we will show them evidence that proves they fired first. War is inevitable. We simply ensure it ends in our favor. Daniel felt sick. 3 million people, families, children, all dead to start a war that would kill billions more. We have to stop him, he whispered. The control console, Grace pointed. If we can reach it, maybe we can shut it down. Guards everywhere, Lyra noted. We'd be cut down before we got close. Daniel looked at the chamber, thinking fast. The Starbreaker itself was contained in an energy field. The control console was on the opposite side, past dozens of armed soldiers. Voren stood on a platform with a clear view of everything. It was impossible. Unless we make it possible, he said slowly. An idea was forming, desperate and dangerous. Lyra, can you disable that energy field? If I can reach the generator, yes. Why? Because if the Starbreaker isn't contained, it will release energy. A lot of energy. Enough to cause chaos. Grace caught on immediately. And in the chaos, we reached the control console. It's risky, Lyra warned. The energy release could kill us all. We're dead anyway if we don't try, Daniel said. They split up. Grace would provide covering fire from the vent. Lyra would disable the containment field. Daniel would make a run for the control console in the confusion. It was a terrible plan, but it was the only plan they had. Lyra dropped from the vent first, landing silently behind a support pillar. She moved like a shadow, years of combat training making her nearly invisible. Daniel watched her slip between guards, heading for the generator. Grace positioned herself at the vent, weapons ready. Daniel took a deep breath, said a silent prayer to anyone who might be listening, and waited for the signal. Lyra reached the generator. She looked up, met Daniel's eyes across the chamber, and nodded once. Then she ripped the generator apart with her bare claws. The containment field collapsed. The Starbreaker's energy exploded outward in a wave of light and force. Alarms screamed. Soldiers were thrown from their feet. Voren roared in fury. And Daniel ran. He ran faster than he'd ever run in his life. Grace's covering fire clearing his path, heading straight for the control console and the only chance they had to save millions of lives. Daniel's fingers flew across the control console, trying to make sense of symbols that were half Old One's technology and half draconian modifications. Energy from the Starbreaker pulsed through the chamber in waves, making his teeth ache and his vision blur. Around him, Voren's soldiers were recovering from the chaos, raising their weapons. "I can't read this," he shouted to Lyra. "I need your help." Lyra was fighting 3 soldiers at once, her movements a deadly dance. She disabled one with a sweep of her tail, knocked another aside with her wing, and clawed the weapon from the third's hands. Then she was at Daniel's side, breathing hard. "The shutdown sequence," she said, pointing at a series of symbols. "There. But it requires 2 simultaneous commands, one from each side of the console." "Then let's do it," Daniel said. "Wait," Lyra grabbed his arm. "If we shut it down wrong, the energy feedback could destroy the entire station. Everyone aboard dies. If we don't shut it down, 3 million people die," Daniel said. "Then billions more when the war starts. That's not a choice." Voren's voice boomed across the chamber. "Surrender now and I'll make your deaths quick." Grace's rifle cracked from above. Not really feeling the surrender option, Daniel and Lyra positioned themselves on opposite sides of the console. "On 3, Lyra said. 1, 2, stop." Voren landed on the platform between them, his massive form blocking access to the console. He backhanded Daniel, sending him flying. Daniel hit the floor hard, tasting blood. Lyra launched herself at Voren, but he was ready. He caught her mid-leap and slammed her down. "Foolish child. Did you really think you could stop this?" The war never ended. It only paused. "You're wrong," Lyra gasped. "Peace is possible. We've seen it. Peace?" Voren laughed bitterly. "I watched humans murder my family. I saw them celebrate as draconian cities burned. There is no peace with them. Only victory or extinction." Daniel pulled himself up, his ribs screaming in protest. "We can break the cycle. We can choose something different." "You're naive," Voren said. "Both of you. The galaxy runs on power, not friendship. The strong survive. The weak die. That's the only truth." Energy crackled around the Starbreaker. The countdown was still running. New Haven would die in minutes unless they stopped it. Daniel met Lyra's eyes across the platform. He saw the same desperate determination he felt. They'd come too far to fail now. He grabbed a discarded weapon and fired at Voren, not to kill but to distract. Lyra seized the moment, her claws finding purchase on Voren's armor. She climbed onto his back, wrapping her tail around his throat. "Now, Daniel." "The console." Daniel ran. Voren tried to throw Lyra off, but she held on with all her strength. Daniel reached his position at the console and slammed his hand down on the first command symbol. "Lyra, your side." She couldn't reach it. Voren had her locked in combat, and Grace was pinned down by soldiers. The timer counted down, 30 seconds until the Starbreaker fired. Then Grace did something incredible. She jumped from the vent. falling 2 stories to land hard on the platform. Her leg buckled, probably broken, but she dragged herself to the other side of the console. "Tell me which one," she shouted. "The blue symbol. Second from the left," Lyra called. Grace hit it with her palm. The console lit up and the Starbreaker's energy began to wind down. But something was wrong. The readings showed a massive buildup instead of a shutdown. "It's reversing," Lyra screamed. "The energy's feeding back into the station. We have to stabilize it manually or the whole structure will explode." "How?" Daniel demanded. Lyra pointed to a chamber beneath the Starbreaker itself. "Someone has to go inside the containment core and balance the energy flow manually. It has to be done from inside." "That's the radiation chamber," Voren said, still struggling with Lyra. "Whoever goes in there will die. Even a Draconian can't survive that much exposure." Daniel looked at the chamber. Through the transparent walls, he could see energy arcing like lightning. It was beautiful and deadly. "Then I'll go. I started this. I'll finish it." "No." Lyra threw Voren aside with desperate strength and grabbed Daniel. "Your human body can't handle it. You'd die in seconds. My physiology can survive long enough to complete the task." "Maybe. Maybe isn't good enough," Daniel said. "I won't let you die for me." "You're not letting me do anything," Lyra said fiercely. "I'm choosing this. Like Roth chose. Like everyone who believes in something bigger than themselves chooses." Voren laughed, the sound bitter and broken. "Fools, you'll both die for nothing. Even if you stop the Starbreaker, the war will come. My people want it. Your people want it. You can't change that." "Maybe not," Lyra said. "But we can try." She kissed Daniel on the forehead, a gesture of affection from her species. Then she ran for the containment chamber before he could stop her. The door sealed behind her with a hiss of compressed air. "Lyra, no!" Daniel slammed his fists against the glass, but it was reinforced, unbreakable. Inside the chamber, Lyra moved to the manual controls. Energy lashed at her, and Daniel could see her scales beginning to char. She was dying right in front of him, and he couldn't do anything to stop it. "The energy flow," she said through the intercom, her voice tight with pain. "I need to redirect it back into stable channels." "Daniel, there's a secondary console on your side. When I give the command, activate the blue and green symbols simultaneously. We'll get you out of there," Daniel said desperately. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," Lyra said simply. "And that's okay. We saved millions of lives today. We proved that cooperation is possible. That's enough." Tears ran down Daniel's face. "It's not enough. I just got you back. I can't lose you again." "You won't lose me," Lyra said, and despite everything, she smiled. "We're 2 halves of one whole, remember? I'll always be with you." Her hands moved over the controls inside the chamber. The energy began to stabilize, flowing into the channel she was directing it to. But the radiation was cooking her alive. "Now, Daniel, the blue and green symbols." He activated them, his vision blurred by tears. The energy flow equalized. The Starbreaker powered down completely. Its threat ended forever, but Lyra collapsed inside the chamber. "Medical team!" Grace was screaming into her communicator. "We need medical immediately." Voren stood silent, watching. For the first time, something like doubt crossed his face. They got the chamber door open. Daniel pulled Lyra out, cradling her in his arms. Her scales were burned, her breathing shallow. But she was alive. "You did it," he whispered. "You saved them all." "We did it," she corrected weakly. "Together." Admiral Harrison's voice crackled over the station's communication system. "This is the Coalition fleet. We're boarding the station. All Draconian forces, stand down." Another voice joined him, this one Draconian. "This is Admiral Sarah of the Dominion fleet. We have surrounded this station. Admiral Voren, you are under arrest for treason." Both fleets had arrived. Both sides had heard everything through Lyra's open communication channel. Her suit had been broadcasting the entire time, sending their conversation, their sacrifice, their desperate attempt to save lives, to both governments. Voren looked at the screen showing both fleets. Then he looked at Lyra dying in Daniel's arms. "You broadcast everything," he said quietly. "The galaxy knows." "They deserve the truth," Lyra whispered. "Both sides deserve to know what we're fighting for, and what we're losing." Soldiers poured into the chamber, both human and Draconian. Medical teams rushed to Lyra, to Grace's broken leg, to the wounded scattered throughout the station. Commander Wilson appeared, looking grim. Lieutenant Cross, you're under arrest for desertion. I know, sir, Daniel said, not letting go of Lyra. Admiral Sarah, a elegant draconian female with silver scales, approached. Princess Lyra will be returned to the Dominion homeworld for trial. The Emperor has demanded her immediate presence. She needs medical attention first, Daniel said fiercely. I don't care what the Emperor demands. Peace, human, Sarah said, but her voice was gentle. She will receive the best care we can provide. You have my word. They tried to separate Daniel and Lyra, but she held on to his hand. Don't forget, she whispered. Don't forget what we proved here. I won't, he promised. I'll make them listen. Both sides. I'll tell them about you, about Roth, about everyone who chose something better. Good, she smiled weakly. That's my human. Always believing things can change. They took her away on a medical stretcher. Daniel watched until she disappeared from sight, then let the coalition soldiers put restraints on him. He didn't resist. He'd done what he came to do. Vorin was also being restrained, surrounded by Dominion soldiers. He looked at Daniel across the chamber. You think you've won? You've only delayed the inevitable. The hatred runs too deep. Maybe, Daniel said, but delay is better than surrender, and small delays can become lasting change, if we're brave enough to try. As they led him away, Daniel looked back at the Starbreaker one last time. The ancient weapon sat dormant, its power contained forever, a tool of creation perverted into a weapon of destruction, now rendered harmless. But the real weapon had never been the Starbreaker. It had been fear, hatred, and the inability to see past differences to the people underneath. That weapon was harder to destroy, but today maybe they'd made a start. The trial chamber was the largest room Daniel had ever seen. It stretched up so high the ceiling disappeared into shadows, and galleries circled the walls packed with spectators from dozens of different species. Cameras recorded everything, broadcasting to billions across the galaxy. This wasn't just a trial. It was theater, politics, and history all happening at once. Daniel stood in the center, flanked by coalition guards. His hands were free, but he might as well have been in chains. The charge was desertion, but everyone knew this was really about something much bigger. About whether a human and a draconian could be friends. About whether peace was worth breaking rules for. On the opposite side of the chamber stood Lyra. She'd survived, though the radiation had left permanent marks on her scales. They no longer shimmered quite as brightly, and she moved with a slight limp. But she was alive, and that was all that mattered to Daniel. She was also on trial, facing the Emperor himself. Emperor Theron sat on a throne of crystal and starlight, massive and ancient with scales that shifted through every color. Beside him sat representatives from the Dominion Council, and across from them, coalition officials including Admiral Harrison and several senators. This joint tribunal will now begin, announced a neutral arbiter from the Galactic Council. We are here to determine the fate of Princess Lyra of the Dominion and Lieutenant Daniel Cross of the Coalition, accused respectively of treason and desertion. The arbiter's voice echoed through the chamber. However, before we proceed, this tribunal acknowledges that the actions of the accused prevented a catastrophic act of terrorism that would have resulted in billions of deaths. This context will be considered. Context doesn't excuse breaking the law, said Senator Morris, a hard-faced coalition politician who'd built his career on anti-draconian sentiment. Lieutenant Cross abandoned his post, stole military property, and collaborated with an enemy power. That's treason by any definition. He saved 3 million lives, Admiral Harrison countered. I'd call that heroism, not treason. He trusted a draconian over his own command structure, Morris shot back. That's a betrayal of everything we stand for. On the draconian side, the debate was just as heated. Councilmember Dravos, an old warrior with scars covering his scales, spoke harshly. Princess Lyra consorted with humans, revealed state secrets, and acted against the direct interests of the Dominion. She should be stripped of her title and exiled. She prevented Admiral Vorin from starting a war that would have destroyed us all, Admiral Sarah argued, including our own colonies that Vorin was willing to sacrifice for his vendetta. Emperor Theron had been silent throughout, watching with eyes that revealed nothing. Now he raised one clawed hand and the chamber fell quiet. I would hear from the accused themselves, he said, his voice deep and resonant. Princess Lyra, you are my daughter. You were raised to put the Dominion above all else. Why did you betray that teaching? Lyra stepped forward, and despite her injuries, she held her head high. Father, I didn't betray the Dominion. I saved it. Admiral Voron's plan would have condemned our people to another generation of war. How many more families would have been destroyed? How many more children would grow up hating like Voron did, like so many still do? You risked everything for a human, Theron said. For a childhood friendship that should have ended decades ago. I risked everything for the belief that we can be better than our hatred, Lyra said. Daniel and I proved that Draconians and humans can work together, can trust each other, can save each other. If we can do it, why can't everyone? Because you're naive, Dravos spat. Humans can't be trusted. The war proved that. The war proved that both sides are capable of terrible things when they're scared, Lyra said. It didn't prove that peace is impossible, only that it's difficult. Now it was Daniel's turn. Senator Morris questioned him directly. Lieutenant Cross, did Princess Lyra seduce you? Manipulate you into betraying your people? Daniel laughed, surprising everyone. No, Senator. She reminded me of something I'd forgotten. That the person you're fighting is still a person. That enemies can become friends if you give them the chance. I didn't betray humanity. I tried to save it. By trusting a draconian princess over your commanding officers? By trusting my friend, Daniel said simply. Lyra and I met as children, before politics and war made us enemies. We saw each other as people first. That's what everyone forgets. We're all people. Human, draconian, whatever. We all love, fear, hope, and dream. Why should politics destroy that? Because that's how the galaxy works, Morris said coldly. Then maybe it's time the galaxy changed, Daniel said. The chamber erupted in arguments. Spectators shouted from the galleries. Cameras flashed. The Arbiter called for order, but it took several minutes to restore quiet. Emperor Theron stood, and his presence commanded immediate silence. He looked at his daughter with an expression Daniel couldn't read. Lyra, you have always been different, softer than the Dominion required. I thought it was a weakness. Lyra's eyes lowered. Father, I was wrong, Theron said, and shock rippled through the chamber. I watched the broadcast from the station. I saw what you did, what you were willing to sacrifice. That wasn't weakness. That was strength of a kind I'd forgotten existed. He turned to address the entire assembly. For too long we have let old wounds dictate our future. We have taught our children to hate before they even understand why. Admiral Voron was a good soldier once, loyal and brave. But hatred poisoned him until he was willing to murder millions of his own people to strike at the enemy. Theron's voice grew stronger. We cannot continue this way. The cycle must end somewhere. Why not here? Why not now? Councilmember Dravos stood. My lord, you can't seriously be suggesting. I am decreeing it, Theron said with absolute authority. Admiral Voron and his conspirators will be tried for treason and attempted genocide. Princess Lyra is pardoned for all charges and appointed as special ambassador to the coalition. And Lieutenant Daniel Cross is declared a friend of the Dominion, a title not bestowed on a human in 300 years. The chamber exploded again, but this time with genuine shock. Senator Morris was on his feet. The coalition hasn't agreed to any of this. Admiral Harrison stood as well. Actually, Senator, we have. While you were grandstanding, I was in communication with the Coalition Council. They've reviewed all evidence from the incident and reached a conclusion. He turned to Daniel. Lieutenant Cross, you are hereby cleared of all charges. Furthermore, you're being promoted to commander and assigned as military liaison to the Dominion. Your new mission is to work with Princess Lyra to establish protocols for joint operations and cultural exchange. Daniel felt dizzy. This wasn't what he'd expected. He'd thought they would imprison him at best, execute him at worst. Sir, I don't understand. You proved something we'd all forgotten, Harrison said. That trust is possible. That enemies can work together if they have the courage to try. We need more of that, not less. Lyra was crying, tears running down her scaled face. She looked at her father with such hope and gratitude that it hurt Daniel's heart to see. Theron approached her and placed one massive claw on her shoulder. You have always been braver than I gave you credit for, daughter. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. Does this mean peace? Someone shouted from the gallery. It means a beginning, Theron said. Peace is not a declaration. It's a choice we make every day. It's work, difficult and constant. But the alternative is unacceptable. The Arbiter made the decisions official. Joint commissions would be established to study the Old One's technology, to create cultural exchange programs, to build trust between species that had been enemies for generations. It wouldn't be easy. There would be resistance on both sides. But it was a start. As the tribunal dissolved, Daniel and Lyra finally reached each other across the chamber. They stood face to face, two people from different worlds who'd somehow found their way back to each other. "We did it," Lyra said softly. "We actually did it." "You did it," Daniel corrected. "You were willing to die for this." "We both were," she said. "That's what friendship means. That's what peace costs." Admiral Harrison approached with Emperor Theron. The two leaders looked at each other with wary respect. "Your daughter is remarkable," Harrison said. "Your officer showed courage beyond his rank," Theron replied. "Perhaps that's what we need more of," Harrison said. "People who act beyond what's expected, who choose what's right over what's easy." "Indeed," Theron agreed. "Which brings me to my next decree. Haven's Rest will be rebuilt as a joint colony, a symbol of what cooperation can achieve. Princess Lyra and Commander Cross will oversee the project." Daniel felt hope bloom in his chest. Haven's Rest, where it all began, where two children had become friends despite what politics said they should be. "We'll make it beautiful," he promised. "Make it safe," Theron said. "Make it a place where children can grow up without learning to hate. That's all I ask." The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Reactions were mixed. Some celebrated, seeing hope for a future without war. Others protested, clinging to old hatreds and fears. There were even incidents of violence as extremists on both sides rejected peace. But slowly, gradually, things began to change. 5 years later, Daniel stood on the rebuilt streets of Haven's Rest and marveled at what they'd created. The colony was alive again, bustling with both humans and draconians. Children of both species played together in parks and attended school side by side. Mixed species families lived in harmony. It wasn't perfect. There were still tensions, still prejudices that took time to overcome. But it was working. Lyra walked up beside him, carrying a small sapling in her clawed hands. "Ready?" "Ready," Daniel confirmed. They'd chosen a spot in the central square where the old colony's memorial had stood. Together they dug a hole and planted the tree, a hybrid species created by human and draconian botanists working together. It would grow tall and strong, its roots mixing soil from both their homeworlds. "Do you remember the promise we made?" Lyra asked, placing the medallion around her neck. The two halves had been permanently joined, a symbol worn by both their peoples now, that we'd always protect each other. "I remember," Daniel said, taking her claw in his hand. "But I think we did more than that. We protected everyone." A crowd had gathered to watch the tree planting. Humans and draconians stood together, some holding hands, some keeping distance, but all sharing the same space peacefully. Grace was there too, leaning on a cane from her injury but smiling. She'd become one of the strongest advocates for cooperation, her brother's death giving her a mission to prevent others from the same loss. Admiral Harrison and Emperor Theron had come as well, their presence showing official support for the colony. As Daniel and Lyra stepped back from the newly planted tree, a small human child approached shyly. Behind her, a young draconian child followed. "Are you the ones from the stories?" the human girl asked. "The pilot and the princess who stopped the war?" "We helped," Daniel said gently. "But we didn't do it alone. Many people chose peace. We just reminded them it was possible." "My mom says you were friends when you were kids," the draconian child said. "Can we be friends too?" Lyra knelt down to their level. "You already are, aren't you?" The children looked at each other and grinned, then ran off to play together. Daniel watched them go, feeling something tight in his chest loosen. This was what it was all for. Not grand politics or historical treaties, just two children playing together, seeing each other as friends first and species second. "We should get married," Lyra said suddenly. Daniel nearly choked. "What?" "It would be symbolic," she said, her eyes twinkling with amusement at his shock. "The first official union between a human and a draconian. It would send a message." "Is that the only reason?" Daniel asked carefully. Lyra's expression softened. "No, I also love you, you idiot. I've loved you since we were children running through ruins. I just didn't have the words for it then." Daniel felt his heart swell. "I love you too. Even when I'd forgotten you, some part of me was searching for what we had." "So is that a yes to marriage?" "That's a yes to marriage," Daniel confirmed. They kissed and cameras flashed across the square as reporters captured the moment. But Daniel didn't care about the politics or the symbolism. He just cared about the woman in his arms. The friend who'd never given up on him even across decades and war. The tree they'd planted would grow. Children would play in its shade. And maybe, just maybe, those children would grow up in a galaxy where the war was just history, not destiny. Peace wasn't easy. It required constant work, constant choice, constant courage. But it was worth it. As the sun set over Haven's Rest, casting golden light over the rebuilt colony, Daniel thought about how far they'd come. From two children making promises they didn't fully understand, to two adults who'd risked everything to keep those promises, to two partners building a future where such promises wouldn't need to be so difficult. "What are you thinking?" Lyra asked. "That we made it," Daniel said. "Against all odds, we actually made it." "We did," Lyra agreed. "And we'll keep making it. Every day. Together. Together." That was the word that mattered most. Not human. Not draconian. Together. The galaxy was changing. One friendship, one choice, one planted tree at a time. And it all started with a dragon princess who smiled and said to a human pilot, "Don't you remember me? I was your childhood friend." He remembered, and that memory had saved them all.